Welcome, Jet fans, to a Victory Friday version of the Jets Life podcast. And believe it or not, the way the season has gone, it's no shock that the Jets got to do something different. We actually have more Victory Fridays than Victory Mondays at this point in the season. So something kind of interesting to go into the season. But obviously, yesterday, huge game, huge win for the Jets. Get off this losing streak a little bit here. Improve to 3-6. And really, before the season really kind of takes any sort of turn towards moving in the right direction, obviously you got to win one before you can win two, before you can really stack wins as the season progresses. But what you saw as team yesterday, defense came out, and defense came out strong in this game. The one area of concern that we've had, and I think still potentially an area of concern, obviously, allowing 187 yards on the ground is not acceptable. That's got to be fixed. It's got to be corrected. Something that needs to just get better as season progresses. The run game has just taken over these teams, and fortunately for the Jets, it seems like this team is a house of horrors for CJ Stroud. In the first two seasons against the Jets, he's had his worst games as a pro. So, and the Jets defense typically does that to a lot of passers. We've seen it out of Josh Allen. We've seen it, even out of Pat Mahomes at times. Has didn't play a great game against the Jets last year. Did enough to win the game, and that's kind of been his mo ever since the last couple of years. Just basically do whatever it takes to win. It's not about the stats; it's about winning games. But nonetheless, I mean, this defense obviously doing enough in the pass game, not enough in the run game, and obviously doing enough to get the win here was probably one of the bigger storylines of this game. The Jets gave CJ Stroud fits throughout this entire game. 8 sacks. Clemens having a coming out game in this game with 2 sacks of his own. Will McDonald, although he didn't line up on the stat sheet from a pass rush standpoint, at least from getting stacks, that is, was all over the backfield. He gave Larry Tunsil problems on that side. Over 20% pressure rate in those passing situations. Like to see him get to the quarterback, but obviously doing enough to force CJ Stroud to kind of merge into the pocket where those interior guys kind of feasted a little bit. Solomon Thomas had a sack, Quinn Williams had a sack and a half, and even Hassan Reddick had his first half sack as a Jet. So defensively, from a pass rush standpoint, things are starting to click. Quinn Williams has multiple games in a row now where he's looked efficient from a defensive line standpoint. There's earlier on the season wasn't really beating those double team and triple teams as much as he had in the past. But now it seems like he's taken that turn. Obviously, with more and more talent on that defensive line with the signing of Hassan Reddick, you'd kind of expect him to free up a little bit, and he's taken advantage of those matchups on the interior. An interesting little note here. Obviously, we all have our issues with Michael Clemens playing on the edge, but going into the inside seems like he lines up better and matches up better against those interior offensive linemen. Like to see the Jets kind of take an approach here where maybe that's his permanent position. I know coming out and in the early stages of his career, the expectation, intention, and hope was that he would be a player that develops into what we had in John Franklin Myers. Problem with that is he's not anywhere near the talent from a prospect as JFM is. So he doesn't really have that, not saying ability, but you don't really feel comfortable with him being your edge setter. I feel more comfortable with him being on the inside, lined up next to Quinnen, and kind of see how he kind of progresses there. The Jets have a major problem on the interior defensive line, so they've got to figure out a way to kind of get bodies in there that you can rely on, that you can trust, that can stop the run. And that, not saying that is Michael Clemens, but he's definitely not the guy on the outside. You have plenty of other players on the outside that you can line up there. If you want to put him in there in certain situations, fine. But I just don't feel confident with him being our primary guy off the edge or on the edge for this team. But nonetheless, this defense did its job. Obviously, early in the game, um, Houston was driving down the field. Quinn Williams comes in and just kind of steamrolls through. I believe it was Kenyon Green, and gets enough pressure to force Stroud to have to move up where he draws the football. Will McDonald with the fumble recovery. So although Will McDonald didn't line up on the stat sheet from a sack standpoint, he did get that fumble recovery. And from a coverage standpoint, it was mostly clean. There were a couple of areas where I felt like Sauce kind of got picked on a little bit. Um, a couple of PIs, and defensive holdings, just stuff that needs to get cleaned up. And in some cases, you just kind of wonder you know what the referees are doing here sometimes. Not saying he's been perfect from a coverage standpoint, but there are some situations where you look at it and you kind of question whether or not it is a true holding, or if they're just kind of you know pointing at him for any sort of contact at that point. So some concerns there. It's got to get cleaned up with his coverage skills. I mean, he's been outstanding his first couple of years, and he is still a great corner. But there are certain situations where you like to see him turn his head and maybe make a play on the ball, and just like maybe let off of the receivers a little bit to not really give the referees that opportunity to throw the flags again. And he's doing what he can. He's doing whatever possible out there, but there's just not much you can do when you're getting flagged for everything. You got to figure out how to kind of adapt, and adjust your game to meet what these referees are expecting out of you. Yeah, so again, outstanding game for this Jets defense. Kept it within striking range for what was a terrible, terrible first half from this offense. It really needed to be done. The Jets defense needed to have one of their better games of the season. They needed to come out here and just protect that whatever cushion that Houston had, not allow it to get anywhere near out of hand. And they held the game together. Again, the running game, it's got to get figured out. You've got to stop the run. You cannot allow teams just kind of steamroll you in the ground game, which is what's been happening pretty frequently. You go through a season, you say, what is this team? What's their identity? Well, right now the Jets are a team that can stop the pass. Obviously, they proved it over the last few years. Had some struggles in the middle of the year. Obviously, everything was a struggle in the first 8 weeks of the season. Um, but we all know what this team is capable of. We all understand the secondary um, has high potential based on its corner play. The question has obviously always been, what are the safeties, and are they going to do enough at the safety position to, allow this defense to take a step forward? Losing Jordan Whitehead was a major problem. Had they fill in that position, they kind of trusted Chuck Clark, and Ashton Davis to have bigger roles on the defense this year, which isn't ideal in my opinion. Tony Adams has been solid, but obviously going through some injury stuff right now. So hence why he couldn't really make it to this game. But again, defensively, they've got to be better. We'd have more wins in the season, obviously, with better play from the defense. We'd obviously have more wins this season with better play from the defense, from the kicking game, punting, obviously field goals. But also the offense has had their struggles too, to not make life easy for this defense. And I guess we'll get into that here now. Um, Tale of two halves is exactly what this game was, more or less. Aaron Rodgers in the first half, 32 passing yards, not good at all. In the second half, 179 yards. There was opportunities in the first half, plenty of them. He had one-on-one situations down the field, and he just missed. The big one, obviously, that deep pass to Devontae Adams that just kind of overshot him a little bit. And then similarly, same thing with Mike Williams. Mike Williams had a couple of steps and he threw it out there. Mike Williams tried diving for it, obviously couldn't get there. So just a terrible first half. A first half that could have been salvaged if not for a fumble at the goal line, at the 1 yard line, 1 inch line by Malachi Corley. Just ran a perfectly designed play to the outside, pitch to Corley, and blockers in front, nobody around. And it's a weird thing that some of these receivers do, and some of these where they just kind of feel the need to drop the ball as soon as like they cross the goal line. Unfortunately for Corley, he dropped the ball as soon as he was about to enter the end zone. So issue with that play is that the ball got fumbled. Nobody recovered it, but it rolled slowly enough to the white line in the back of the end zone to where it's ruled a touchback. And Houston was able to kind of take over possession. It would have been a first. If the ball had stopped in the end zone with nobody picking up, obviously an official would have picked it up. Without a player on the field picking it up, it would have resulted in Jets getting the ball at the spot of the fumble, which would have been first and goal at the 1 inch line, which we know what that has looked like for a majority of the season. But yeah, there's one of those issues, like, when you're a team that's struggling, and you're a rookie player that hasn't seen the field much, at all through the first 8 games of the season, you have an opportunity like that to prove, like, hey, I belong on the field. You know, get the ball in space, run through. You're the Yak King. I know it wasn't a catch, obviously, but getting the ball after, what do you do with the ball after it's in your hands? Wide open grass, you make the right moves, make the right reads, get to the open field, score a touchdown, keep the ball in your friggin' hands. And not to mention, you're a rookie. You're a rookie who hasn't seen the field a lot. Your first NFL touchdown. Why are you dropping that football? Don't you want that as a souvenir? I mean, obviously, somebody would have picked it up, given it to him, and it would have made its way to his trophy shelf at some point. But God, it's one of those situations where it could have come back to bite us in the ass. Houston obviously kind of shot themselves in the foot a couple of times in the red zone. That fumble I mentioned earlier, a couple of missed kicks. You know, make those plays, and you're talking about a one possession game, even closer than that. Late in the fourth quarter, we just keep that ball in our hands, cross that goal line. This is a much bigger win than it turned out to be. It's closer to that game that we had last season where we beat them at a score of 30-6. So again, just very concerned with, where his head was at in that play. Didn't score a touchdown. Luckily enough for the Jets, we were able to kind of, get things corrected in the second half. And then talking about the second half, Garrett Wilson, obviously, over the past week, after really not the past week, really the past 4 days, after that New England game, all of our eyes, mine included, kind of shift to what's the rest of the season look like. Um, some even taking it a step further, and what does the future look like? What does the next 4 or 5 years look like? And certain opinions, everyone's entitled to their own opinion, obviously, but certain opinions I just cannot get on board with. The opinions of kind of cutting bait with a guy like Garrett Wilson, cutting bait with a guy like Sauce Gardner, players who are not playing to their highest potential um, this season. Well, Garrett Wilson has turned the corner over the last 4 weeks. He's got 100 yards in what 3 of the last 5 games. This game, 2 touchdowns, 2 amazing touchdown catches. I know that obviously a second touchdown is going to get all the glory. Looking like Michael Jordan, Michael Jordan's logo, reaching up, grabbing the ball, coming down, and getting that right foot down twice in the shin, obviously being the critical factor in completing the catch. I guess one shin equals 2 feet is the rule. Getting that shin down, all aspects of that play were absolutely outstanding. I thought his first touchdown was, you know, obviously not to that level, but still an amazing play. Jalen Petrie kind of cutting in to break up the ball. Aaron Rodgers delivers it in a spot, in like the perfect spot, for Jalen Petrie to kind of miss the breakup. And let's be real, Garrett Wilson to make this catch has to make the catch with one hand. He does, makes a cut, makes people miss, runs it into the end zone. This is the Garrett Wilson that, we thought we were getting, we're hoping we were getting, and it's really kind of looking awesome to see what his career is turning out to. I mean, he's on pace for outstanding year, about 1,200 yards receiving. Really, anybody who had those like crazy expectations, and I did have crazy expectations. I did think he was going to hit 1,300 yards, but there was those out there that just thought this was going to be a monster of a year. 1,500 yards receiving, 10 to 15 touchdowns, 100 something receptions, which I think he will get 100 receptions. I think he's on pace for that this year. More or less 112 is his pace right now. So I think he will get the 100 catches, but I think to have expected a 1,500 yard season for a guy that's, had terrible quarterback play, still had 1,000 yard seasons, it's a huge step. Devontae Adams didn't hit that 1,500 yards with Aaron Rodgers until I believe it was like 7th season as a pro, and I think his 3rd or 4th season as like the prime as one of the primary players. So it took time to build that rapport and build that chemistry. And we know what Devontae Adams is now. Obviously, he's a magnificent route runner. Um, you know, exceeded his draft position, but the Packers had players in front of him that he had to kind of work his way into the lineup and eventually be that starter. But even with that, even with his talent and his potential, et cetera, it still took time for him to reach that expectation that we all had for Garrett Wilson in year one. Again, I felt like it was going to fall down more in that 1,300-yard range. He's on pace for 1,200, and let's be real, that initial wave of games kind of hindered his pace a little bit here. He's on a track right now where he's getting close to 100 yards every game now. Rodgers trusts him. He's getting targeted a lot. Don't know what happened in the beginning of this game where he only had one target in the entire first half. Obviously, the game plan opened up, things smartened up. I like those little quick bubble screens. I would like it for Garrett Wilson to make that, you know, initial step forward instead of waiting for a guy to miss. Apply pressure. These guys are gonna just if they know your um, initial move is to kind of wait and kind of make a move. They're gonna sit back. They're gonna play, kind of hold their ground and try to avoid that. But if you make that catch, you just start running. Um, I feel like you have more of an opportunity to make someone miss at that point. Um, Obviously, he doesn't have the frame to really run through people. That's not what he is, but doesn't mean he can't do it. Change your game up a little bit. I think all these players have aspects of their game that they kind of leverage to, and they can adapt to. I look at Will McDonald, and he's a player that, when you look at him, he's outstanding. He has his move, breaks it to the outside, gets there quick. Um, but I think even for him, his next step is to kind of shorten that edge. Maybe come in a little bit more, kind of take a little more of a narrow cut. Because obviously, when you're going out wide like that, the risk is that the quarterback just needs to step up and out, and you kind of have that room. But if you kind of come in more narrow with your cut, he doesn't have that ability. He has to kind of run outwards, which with his speed would get him out there. Obviously, I'm not here kind of trying to coach and doing that stuff, but it's just little areas that this team can improve on. Garrett Wilson, outstanding game. Just, you know, super excited for what he has become at this point in the season and what he will eventually become into. He was a player. He was my number two actually in that draft because I really wanted Jameson Williams, but with the injury, I knew that wouldn't really fit what the Jets needed. So with Jameson Williams' injury, Garrett Wilson was the guy I wanted the Jets to get. I watched a lot of Ohio State football while he was there, and he just seemed like a player that just had that ability. And actually seeing what I believed he had coming to fruition is really really cool. There's still a lot of room for growth. Would really like to see him be more aggressive with the ball in his hands instead of sitting and waiting. But gotta do what you're comfortable with. He had an outstanding game, two brilliant touchdown catches, and a huge reason as to why we're sitting here at 3-6 instead of 2-7, which would have just been absolutely disastrous. Not that 3-6 is great, but you can't get wins back from what happened in the past. Other than that, I mean, the rest of this offense, Devontae Adams, I got to kind of give him some credit for what he did here in this game. Really a big reason as to why things opened up here. Devontae Adams also with a monster game. Actually, him and Garrett Wilson have very similar stat lines. Obviously, Garrett Wilson with the 9 catches, Devontae with 7, both with 90 yards receiving, Devontae with 91, Garrett with 90, and then obviously the touchdowns. But Devontae Adams showed a lot of bravery, a lot of courage. Big concern that I had after the Jets made this trade, which I mean, obviously, if you would have went to the Chiefs, if you went to the Bills, if you would have went to Houston, if you would have went basically anywhere else other than the Jets, you would have heard this move kind of treated with glowing endorsements. It would have been, you know, the greatest trade in the history of trades. Even if it was for the exact parameters that the Jets traded for. It's just when the Jets make a trade, it's doomed for failure. When any other team makes a trade that's not the Jets, it's like, okay, where's the upside here? And where the upside is that this guy, came in here and has been all in from the moment he's been here. We all talked about it in length. but 4 days into being a Jet wide receiver, understood that something was wrong. In that Pittsburgh game, his first game as a Jet, understood there was something going on. There was a reason that there was issues with his team not showing excitement for a big play by Brees Hall, just didn't have that energy. The lack of energy was kind of mentioned in multiple instances by players on his team after that, after that Steelers game. But here's a player that comes in, um, middle of the third quarter, whatever it was, makes a fantastic catch down the sideline, gets hit, kind of falls out of bounds a weird way, gets put into concussion protocol, and as soon as he gets out of the tunnel, he's back on the field in a couple of seconds. Um, Obviously, these guys are here to play football, but he could have easily, with the state of this team, um, played it off. It was more of an injury than it needed to be. But he got back on that field, and good thing he did because 4 plays later he was in the end zone. A deep pass, Aaron Rodgers making up for that complete miss in the early stages of the game, hits Devontae Adams for a long, long touchdown, and kind of put the game at that point put the game out of reach for Houston. We were up 2 scores, and that was critical. I know in that particular moment in time, the Jets were in a position to kind of try and run out the clock. When you play that game, sometimes unfortunately it doesn't always work in your favor, especially when you have the ball with 6 minutes left in the game. It's a tough ask. It's possible. We've seen it happen many times. San Francisco has been kind of king of doing that for many, many years. Tennessee did that for a long time with Derrick Henry in the backfield. It works at times, but when you play a game, you run the risk, obviously, of not running the clock out and giving the other team an opportunity to go down and score a game-tying field goal, touchdown, whatever the score would have been. If the Jets have been in that situation, they were close to field goal range, but obviously are dealing with a first-time kicker who struggled a little bit. He made all his extra point attempts, but one of them did hit off the upright and bounce in, so he was fortunate of that. Field goals are just going to be a thing of a little bit of a nightmare, I think, for the Jets the rest of this way, whether it's a successful season or not. But nonetheless, the Jets weren't put in that position. They were able to march down the field, get that long touchdown to Devontae Adams, make it an 11-point game, and the rest is history. Houston couldn't get down the field and score a touchdown. Kind of an interesting drive at the end of the game with like 3.5 minutes left for Houston to get that ball. Jets defense doing what I think an NFL defense needs to do. Obviously, get the turnover, get that third down sack, get that fourth down sack. Obviously, that is the more favorable way of going about it. But the way that the Jets kind of operated that drive was pretty marvelous for a team for not getting a turnover, for not getting that big sack. Um, Kind of methodically, just guy makes a catch, tackle him immediately, keep him behind the sticks as much as possible. Got Houston in plenty of third down situations, a couple of fourth down situations. Houston is a good offense. They convert on a couple of those occasions. Got all the way into the 3 yard line. Jets get a big sack on second down, and I was kind of shocked. I mean, I understand the premise behind it. Get the field goal, get the onside kick, and score a touchdown. But you're at the 8 yard line. I was a little shocked that they didn't just take one more shot. I mean, I think at that point it was like 39 seconds left. I mean, would you rather have 39 seconds, kick that field goal? I mean, regardless, that next play's taking up time anyway. You still, I guess what I'm just trying to get at is I just don't understand why Houston didn't take one more shot at the end zone because I feel like you have a better opportunity to get, I mean, regardless, you have to get the onside kick. So that's neither here nor there. But I think you have a better opportunity of from the 8 yard line getting that touchdown and the 2 point conversion than having to kick the field goal there, get the onside kick, go the length of the field or whatever's left of it. I think get the ball at like the 40 yard line, going 60 yards to get the touchdown and then get the 2 point conversion. You kind of put more risk at that point in the game. So I was a little confused as to why they just didn't take one more shot at the end zone. Glad they didn't, obviously. They didn't get the onside kick anyway, so it wouldn't have mattered. But it was just one of those weird kind of situations. I feel like sometimes coaches trying to outsmart themselves with certain situations. Um, but regardless, nonetheless, Jets are able to get the win. Score of 21-13. Could have been a lot more. Could have been a lot worse. But the Jets are able to get this win. And what does this win mean moving forward? Um, you know, you can take this win two different ways. You can say we've seen what this team was over the first 8 games of the season. It hasn't been great. It's shown flashes, but then it's also shown a majority of negativity and just not doing enough. Um, there were still red flags in this game. The biggest red flag being the yards on the ground for the defense allowed. 187 yards, not acceptable. Still a lot of penalties, especially on the defense side of the ball. Can't have that. But the offense in the second half was a completely different offense than we've seen throughout the first 8.5 weeks or so, outside that New England game, in week 3. This offense just has not shown enough on a consistent basis for any of us to feel confident that this is a turn for the better. But we all understand the talent on this team, and we all understand that the probably the biggest thing holding this team back from its potential is was even the play calling, the not coming into the stadium ready to play. And I think you saw a little bit here where, I mean, the play calling under Downing has been way better than it was under Hackett. I think we've seen a little more creativity. Obviously, that pitch back was a big one, but you're seeing a lot more motion. I do tend to like that play that they run pretty frequently, where they kind of stack the line of scrimmage a little bit with with Brees and everything. And it's just a short pitch. It's just like 2 yards outside, just to get Brees a little bit more outside of tackles, and they have a pulling guard, and there's bodies in front to block for him. I do like that play a lot, and it's something that's kind of been built into their game plan a little bit more, obviously, than we've seen throughout the first half of the season. But it's something that got implemented in that very first game against Buffalo, and it was effective against Buffalo. A few large chunk runs came off of that play design. Um, Lining up Garrett Wilson in the backfield, flanking him out. They do the same thing with Devontae Adams. There's just massive confusion that they're causing because of the skill players they have. You have got to keep an eye on Devontae Adams at all times. You have got to keep an eye on Garrett Wilson at all times. You've got to keep an eye on Brees Hall at all times. Um, when you have so many skill players that teams have to respect and honor from that point, when you're moving these guys around, it's not easy for a defense to kind of you know, get ready pre-snap, figure it out. It's why a lot of those quick bubble screens are working, where they're just kind of you know, chopping it out there. I feel like that's a big step in the right direction from the second half, was doing those couple of plays on consecutive sequences. I think they hit Garrett Wilson on one side where he got a first down, and then a couple plays later, they had Devontae Adams on the other side. Similar play type. I think on Devontae Adams' side, I want to say Brees was in front of him as a blocker. On Garrett's side, it was Devontae Adams in front as a blocker. These play designs were not something that we had seen from the Jets really at all under Hackett. And obviously, Hackett's time was mostly kind of hindered by the fact that he had, Zach Wilson as his play caller or as his quarterback. But you know, it hasn't been great with even Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. Things had to change, obviously, and they did. But it's pretty impressive here to see that things are starting to move in the right direction. And a big thing that those like quick passes do for this offense as well. It hasn't been great from you know a blocking standpoint up front, and they're doing a pretty good job overall. Um, at least this past game, kind of keeping Rodgers upright. I mean, obviously there was a couple pass rushes, a couple sacks in this game, but not nearly as many as we have seen. Rodgers has shown a little bit more mobility and a little bit more of an ability to kind of get out of the pocket over the last couple weeks, including that that run he had. Um, but 2 sacks allowed in this game. Um, by this Jets offensive line. It's getting better. It's not perfect. Would still like to see a little bit more effectiveness on the ground game, but things seem to be opening up a little bit more here. You hope that's a turn for the right direction, but I'd kind of urge on the side of caution a little bit here. This team has done this so many times over the past few years, um, where have an outstanding win that they are not supposed to win, followed up against a team like Arizona, who I think Arizona is still, they're promising still. I'm not going to sit here and say Arizona's, an easy win or whatever have you. Arizona is a team that we can definitely lose to, especially being on the road in Arizona. James Conner is an outstanding runner. It won't be easy at all. I don't. I still have major concerns with this game. Obviously, with Kyler Murray as the quarterback, we'll go into the game in a deeper dive next week when I do this podcast again on Friday. Won't be a victory Friday. It will just be a preview Friday. But this team has got to earn our respect. They've got to kind of earn that kind of benefit of the doubt that a lot of other teams get. This team hasn't reached that point just yet. They've got to show that they can stack wins before we can really kind of step forward. But this is a step in the right direction. Getting a big win at home against a team that you were supposed to lose to, showing outstanding defensive line play, showing really really good offensive play in the second half. Um, to tell it who has what's the true offense? Is it the one in the second half or is it the one in the first half? I tend to believe it's somewhere in the middle. Um, like to be closer to what we saw in the second half than what we were in the first half, but things seem to be moving in the right direction on the offense side of the ball. Just got to stack days like that, stack weeks like that, and hopefully, they can really kind of make this thing interesting. They've got to get to 500 before really any sort of, outlandish kind of following really kind of impacts. I mean, this fan base has been brutalized over the last couple of seasons. It's been a struggle. It's been very frustrating. It's been stressful being a fan of this team for years. One win is not going to change any of that. You've got to earn the respect of this fan base. We are not blind to the fact that this team is not treated us the way we just really deserve to be treated based on how loyal we have been to this team. It's got to get corrected. And this was a major step in that right direction. Let's see where it moves going forward. But this is definitely a team that has all the potential in the world to be able to go on a run. They have a quarterback in Aaron Rodgers who say what you want about what he is versus what he was. He's putting together a good season this year. He's putting together a much better season than his last season in Green Bay. He's putting together an all-time Jet season that we're all very fortunate to be able to witness. Unfortunately, those wins just aren't there right now. It would be, you know, the offense has had its fair share in what everything that's going on. I'm not going to take any blame away from what this offense has been. It's been putrid. But with all that being said, make a couple of kicks in the Denver game. Um, Obviously, the Patriots game, make a couple of kicks in those games. You're talking about this team could be at this point in time, um, 4-5, possibly 5-4, possibly even 6-3. You could even reverse our record. Again, obviously, I'm not gonna say that we win all those games because of Zerline's missed field goals. Because obviously those games change as well. I mentioned it last week. He makes those field goals against Buffalo. Buffalo still has like 5 minutes with the football. Are we just thinking that they're gonna play the same type of offense they played the rest of the game? No, they're gonna play a game to try and score and win, not a game to try and get a couple first downs around the clock. So things obviously change, but 5-4 is a hell of a lot better than 3-6 right now. And instead of looking at the negativity of what the season has been to this point, we're looking at it and saying, "Oh wow, 5-4, we're right in the thick of everything. Aaron Rodgers is having an all-time Jet season," and we're looking at everything a little bit differently. Fact of the matter is, wins are more important than stats, and the Jets need to start winning more. And this was a good start. We'll see how it goes from here on out. That's all I got. Outstanding win, huge win for this team. Want to see more. got a long break here, 10 days to prepare. We had 10 days to prepare for um, after that first New England game, came out flat. New coaching staff, new team. Is this kind of take us to that next phase where maybe Ulbrich kind of got that first win? Does it kind of keep things moving that right direction? I damn sure hope so. I'm hoping we're talking in 10 days from now, and talking about a victory Monday, our second victory Monday this season, getting ready for what could be a huge matchup against Indianapolis the week after. But again, this team has to show us before we get in the benefit of the doubt at this point. If you haven't already, if you don't mind, please like the channel, subscribe, or like the video, subscribe to my channel. Helps me grow, and it's how I'll be found. Appreciate the help, and most importantly, let's go Jets.